Fresno.
Keep going, Michaela, or are we ready for me?
Yes, I think Being's having some technical difficulties on hearing me, so I'm just texting her in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. And so before we get into this presentation, I just want to let you all know on how to raise your hand during the Zoom meeting. And so to do this, you'll click on the icon labeled participants at the bottom center of your PC or Mac. It's labeled 1 here. And at the bottom of the participant window on the right side, you'll click the button labeled raise hand. And we will unmute those with their hands raised in the order that they appear on the participant window. The hand icon will turn blue and the text below it will switch to lower hand while your hand is raised. Please click on the lower hand after your question has been answered. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And apologies, I think we're having some technical difficulties. And I will contact the Being right now just to see what the status is.
Michaela, do you have the presentation slide deck?
I do not. I think
Zoe, I have a couple different things going, so I'm gonna do my own slides.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and I'm ready to go, Michaela, if we want to just go there.
Yeah,
perfect. Sorry, cool. I think I'm trying to coordinate with the other so I think you can just go ahead. Thank you. Awesome. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, welcome everybody. My name's Chad Fisher, and Michaela, thank you for teeing it up. I'm a senior engineer in DDW Safer, and I lead a relatively new unit called the Rural Solutions Unit. And like the name implies, we focus on small, disadvantaged communities that don't necessarily have an opportunity to physically connect as a drinking water solution. And so one of the things over the last year or so that this unit, the Rural Solutions Unit, has been focusing on is point of use and point of entry. And that's why I'm here today to talk with you. Like I said, I was able to start this unit a little more than a year ago. And then previous to that, I've been a staff engineer and a district engineer in our Fresno field office for the last, I guess it's been 14, 15 years now. So with that said, I'm going to dive into my presentation. Let me tell you this, that this presentation originally was framed up as focusing on kind of drinking water for schools and about implementing point of use and point of entry at schools. And so there's going to be a significant portion of this discussion, really. It's only a couple slides, but a significant portion of this discussion that really focuses on schools and kind of the difficulty in implementing in schools and in a couple different paradigms. So I think that will end up being kind of one of the focuses. Another focus is that I have a few slides on kind of point of use and point of entry implementation in general, and some considerations and steps to move through. That's kind of at the tail end. I also have a few slides that I'm going to tee things up with. So even though I went kind of in a weird order there, I'm going to tee things up. We'll talk about drinking water we'll talk about point of use and point of entry implementation in schools and some of the unique features. And then we'll talk about kind of point of use, point of entry implementation in general for public water systems. I'm going to pause every couple slides for questions. And so if you want to put your question into the chat or just save it and know that I'll pause every couple slides, that's just fine too. So I don't want anybody's question to get kind of left behind and as the conversation moves on. So I'll try to pause there. Maybe I'll pause 1 second here just to make sure that folks can hear me and see the screen. Somebody give me a verbal maybe.
Yes, we can hear and see you fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect, great. Okay, so here we go. So just to tee it up, and I think that we're all here, but as long as we're level setting a bit, point of use and point of entry, right? For point of use, we're talking about a point of use device, a small treatment plant that is a device that's usually located underneath the kitchen sink, right? And so in that paradigm, there is a single spigot, usually a separate spigot next to the kitchen sink that dispenses, safe drinking water. And all of the rest of the water, we're talking about a paradigm where it's in, a water system that is experiencing contamination. All the other water in the house is not treated, right? And all of the water that, watering the lawn or whatnot is not treated also. So rudimentary to some folks, but if you're not here, then, the rest of it's not going to make sense. So then point of entry, right? This is a little bit bigger treatment plant, and it's outside of
Chad,
Yeah.
sorry. Your power slides are not showing.
Really? Okay.
Right.
Can you see that? No.
No.
Okay. Let me try again. Sorry. So when you were saying you can see my screen, you can see me on screen, which is not as interesting. Now
There you go.
Now can we see them? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for interrupting. Okay, quick rewind. So these little infographics, cartoons show point of use and point of entry. Like I said, point of use, small device, kind of think of it as a small treatment plant underneath the sink. We already talked about that. And then point of entry, a little bit bigger treatment plant that's usually located on the side of the house, maybe in the garage. But the distinguishing factor here is that point of entry treats all of the water going into the home. So there is no separate spigot at the kitchen sink. It's, all of the water coming out of the kitchen sink, all of the water, shower, even flushing toilets, right, is treated water. But then, still the water that, maybe waters the grass or your water the flowers, that is not treated. So if I use point of use or point of entry, this is what I'm talking about. Again, I think we're here, but level setting is always. And then I also wanted to say that if we're thinking about point of use and point of entry, if we take just like maybe a half a step back or a whole step back, is like we're thinking about solutions for drinking water contamination, right? And that what this slide is trying to do is trying to say point of entry and point of use are kind of all on one side of the continuum, which is that, and this continuum is kind of most robust drinking water solution, and then all the way down to kind of least robust, and then just on the other side of that is kind of no solution, right? So I really want to emphasize that when we talk about point of use and point of entry, we are talking about a solution when the other solutions don't fit, and they could not fit for many reasons. It could be technical, it could be financial, it could be social, it could just not fit, right? And so I'm compelled to run through these because I really want to frame point of use and point of entry as a drinking water solution in that light, that if consolidation is available, then that is what we should be focusing on. And if consolidation is not available, we should be thinking about a new or alternative source that may not need treatment. And then, and some of these can be maybe the lines are a little more blurry than these boxes, right? But then we could think about centralized treatment for an impaired source Then we might even think about a dual distribution system where part of the water in the community is treated, the part that goes into people's houses, and then part is not. And then finally, we could think about point of use and point of entry. And this isn't an exhaustive list, but this is usually what we see out, as we're implementing solutions in communities, right? And you'll need to kind of, kind of do some analysis on cost, on resiliency, on technical merit, on social aspects, right? And the unique needs of the communities and the people in those communities. So the more I dive into and talk to people about point of entry and point of use, I always want to frame it up this way, because I think that sometimes there's miscommunication about we're choosing X or Y, and kind of how is that being chosen as a fit, what considerations are being taken, and that I'm camping out here because, again, I want to emphasize the kind of the robustness of consolidation or alternative sources, et cetera, and then down to point of use and point of entry. And it's almost a solution where no other solution might exist. So I want to talk about equity for a moment, and then we'll pause for questions if there are. In a recent report that DDW did, DDW, DFA, Office of Public Participation, and then many stakeholders participated. Great report and is being finalized now, but we looked at a little bit of equity. If you look at this map here on the left, it's 122 public water systems where point of use and point of entry are either being used right now, they're permitted and in use to solve a drinking water problem or to address a drinking water problem, or that they are in that permitting process. So 122 public water systems. We know quite a bit about these systems because there's permitting that is required to address a compliance issue, right? And if you look at the color of those dots, so we have the Cal Enviro score there. Two things. One is that on those dots, lighter colors are worse, and then darker colors are actually a better situation for the community. If folks are not familiar with Cal Enviro score, what it tries to do is it takes two different parameters, two different groups of parameters actually, and scores them from 1 to 10 and then multiplies them together to get this score of, at least for us, 2.2 up to almost 100. So one is, and these are my words, not Cal Enviro score, but how I think of it is, one is kind of pollution burden, how much pollution, how much contaminant, how much kind of potential exposure does a community have? So poor air quality or poor water quality can contribute here, pesticide use, et cetera. And then on the other side is how much kind of susceptibility does that community have? And so things like poverty, access to healthcare, isolation of communities, are on that side, right? Like, so there's a potential exposure and then the actual kind of susceptibility, multiply those together and you get the score. And so you can see those scores for these point of use and point of entry projects. And then if we look at majority race, you can see that, you can see the distributions of majority race in these 122 public water systems that we're talking about. And you can see that, almost 2/3 Hispanic, about 1/3 white, and then the other two groups represented are Asian, which it was one as the majority race, and then other for a couple more. So, and then disadvantaged status, what we see is that about half are disadvantaged or severely disadvantaged, and then the other half are not disadvantaged, which is interesting. And I think what it says is that kind of no matter if you're small enough, it doesn't matter how affluent your community is, that oftentimes centralized treatment or another drinking water solution, it just doesn't, you don't have the economies of scale. And so in very small communities, point of use and point of entry on economics, on the affordability is we're gonna see that. And I bring up these equity considerations because I think as all of us, think about and implement drinking water solutions, we need to think about equity. And for me, the equity question with point of use and point of entry is, are we, all of us, disproportionately deploying point of use and point of entry as a drinking water solution for disadvantaged communities and communities of color? And we need to continually kind of ask ourselves that and think about ways, think about that question and think about ways to take all of the considerations into account. So I'm going to pause here. My next slide is actually more of the technical nuts and bolts that you probably thought you were showing up for. But I'll pause here if there's any questions. I am relying on, sorry to take a chat. Okay, can't see that. Okay. I'm going to take the silence as no questions for now. Okay. Okay, great. Kind of into the second chunk of the, second chunk of the presentation, which is really what I think needs some discussion and needs us to camp out on, is we're thinking about this was the driver for this, which is, if we're thinking about point of use or point of entry as a drinking water solution in a school, there's two paradigms we need to think about. And one is a public water system that is a school, right? It is a rural school. I'm kind of getting out of order here, but fair enough. This is the second bullet. Is a rural school, and they likely have a groundwater well in the back, and maybe they have a storage tank or something like that. But that is the public water system, right? It serves the staff and students and infrequent visitors to the school, other infrequent visitors to the school, or maybe some frequent visitors, right? So that's one. That is, the school is the public water system. The other one is that there is a public water system out there, and some of their customers, right? They serve residents, they serve houses, they probably serve, maybe some businesses. They also may serve a school, okay? And so this is a community water system that serves water to a school. So there's like a CSD or PUD or even a city, that has sources and operators and potentially treatment and whatnot. And just, one of the customers is a school. And we all know that some of these communities, a small CSD or PUD are perfect examples. Some of them struggle with contamination, and it's probably groundwater contamination, because that's usually those are the contaminants we think about treating with point of use and point of entry, and there are some exceptions, but for what we're talking about, I think it's helpful to frame it that way. So you have a small CSD or a PUD, right? They have a couple wells, but they own and operate those, and they employ operators and whatnot. And again, a school is one of their customers, and they're different when we think about point of use and point of entry. I'm going to get to a different document here in a second, but what I'm going to get to is what are the differences, and there's kind of a decision tree or a flow chart. So maybe I'll share that now. All right, can you guys see this PDF? Somebody say yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thanks, Michaela.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to work through this flow chart a bit, and then to talk about the differences, and we're going to end up talking about some of the red flags, mainly around deploying point of use or point of entry at a school that is served by a public water system. And there are red flags, and that just there's special circumstances, and not that we not that they're obstacles that we can't overcome, but that we need to recognize them. So let's move through this flow chart. First question is the school a public water system? I think I already framed that up. Let's say yes. They are a public water system. They're a rural school. They have a well, they have a storage tank, and they have arsenic, and so, we're trying to, deploy a solution there. So this is pretty straightforward in the regulations. We all probably look at those I look at those regulations. I don't know. Others should also look at those regulations, and there's pretty strict rubric around what is the permitting process for point of use or point of entry at a public water system. And so this is the framework that we are thinking about, right? And so really the requirements are around this change to a permit, which is a permit amendment, which is this change in treatment. And on the next kind of page, we'll look at the high points of that permitting process. But some things to consider, right? There's an operator requirement that is T1 or higher. If a public water system uses groundwater and chlorinates, they'll likely have a T1 but this could be a bit of a sticking point, and that's why it's here, is that there is an operator requirement for point of use and point of entry. The district is going to permit this, and in their permit, there's going to be PS codes and sampling requirements, right? The sampling, like the PS codes are where the sampling results end up, right? And this last piece, this sampling and the O&M is by the school, right? Like maybe folks are like, yeah, Chad, duh. But this ends up being important. And so it's maybe a contract operator, maybe it is a maintenance person at the school. Heck, at some places it's the superintendent of this small school, right? That is actually going and collecting samples and whatnot and has the operator certification. Okay, so that is if the school is a public water system. So is the school a public water system? No. Okay. First of all, we have to say, like, does the school serve at least 25 people? Because if not, then the regulations don't apply. I think there's still some best practices here, and much of what we're talking about still applies, but there isn't a regulatory framework to work with, right? And so it can get, I was going to say murky, but it just, I think most of the regulatory framework then just apply as best practices, right? But there aren't any regulatory teeth behind it. Okay, so that's just maybe a no, by the way. But so if the school does have a population that's, students and staff, 25 or greater, and again, sorry if I seem repetitive here, but the framework we're in here, right, is usually a small CSD that happens to serve a school. There's a school in their community. Maybe there's a couple hundred homes, but there's also a school. And so that's where we are here. And if that school serves more than 25 people, here we are is like, yes. And then really here's some of the punchlines. And if you don't hear anything else from my presentation, this is probably the thing to pay attention to. Is like, is the public water system, so in our scenario, the CSD or the PUD, are they a willing partner? Because if they are a willing partner, they're going to take much of the responsibility for implementing this point of use or point of entry program. And if they are not a willing partner, it doesn't make things impossible for the school if they want to move forward with point of use or point of entry, but it has this cascade of effects that end up being quite complicated. So let's say the public water system is not willing to be a partner with the school. This red box, maybe it should have should be more red or something, but this is kind of a difficult outcome. So the school becomes a public water system. It would end up, because they're the reasoning behind that is because now they are installing treatment. They become a public water system, even though they're served by the CSD, they become a public water system. They need a permit, and then all of the requirements around Safe Drinking Water Act apply, right? And so what they've just signed up for is, you know, a lot more, you know, a bunch of ongoing monitoring. They've signed up for a permitting, you know, annual permitting fee. They've signed up for an operator dedicated to the operations at this, at their school. And they've now also turned the CSD into a wholesaler. And so, like I said, there's a cascade. We don't have to get into all of it, but there's a cascade of kind of regulatory effects, let's just say. I'm struggling not to say bad outcomes. It's just more challenging in outcomes. So that's if the public water system is not a willing partner. And so I'm gonna sidebar here is that if we're thinking about this scenario, I think the first thing to do is to engage the leadership at the school and the leadership at the public water system and try to ensure that folks are on board and really answer that question up front, because if we get all the way, we get further down the road and it ends up that the public water system isn't on board, like I said, we have some challenging, we have some obstacles to overcome. Okay, let's say the public water system is a willing partner. This is great. This is where we want to be. The public water system already has much of the, I was going to say infrastructure, but it's not the nuts and bolts of it. It's really they have some capacity in some kind of human resources capacity. They already have a permit. They're already familiar with a regulatory framework. And so there's another little layer added on, but it's not something that, you know, is completely outside of what they're currently doing. So there's a streamlined permitting process. Like I said, they already have a permit, so they'll get a permit amendment that outlines what the monitoring plan is, what the operations and maintenance cost is, adds some PS codes for the water quality to land, where the water quality can land. And then there's, you know, and then it also really outlines responsibility, which is the responsibility ends up being on the public water system for the operations and maintenance of these devices. And, you know, I've seen it go both ways, like folks are okay with that, or folks sometimes are not okay with that. It's a bit of an ask, you know, I don't want to downplay that it definitely requires involvement from the public water system and some time invested, and again, this responsibility. So again, a conversation to have up front. Let's go down to some of these boxes. Maybe I will read them off. So some of the things to think about is just communications between the school to students, maybe also the community to the school, maybe also the community to residents, right? There is some complicated messaging. There could be some complicated messaging in this paradigm, right? Because the school via point of use or point of entry is receiving treated water, but this ends up being different water quality than the kids or than the residents in the community have, and so thus the kids have at home. And so there is a potential for some conflicting messaging if it isn't very clear, right? And I think it's as simple as being clear as that, hey, the school has treated water, everywhere else does not, right? But I mean, I've been around public notification enough to know that it's not that simple, right? And so for all of us to keep that in mind. And then that the device locations are critical. You know, trying to ensure that there's access, right? That the the locations where point of use and point of entry are being deployed make sense for the school, for the students and the staff at the school. And all of this, you know, whether you're in either paradigm of the public water system, well, actually in all paradigms, you know, the district office, the DDW district office is going to be, you know, a critical ally for all of us, because there's, you know, there's going to be changes in permits to folks, and then sometimes it's useful to the DDW district office can unravel some of the regulations and answer some of the questions around that regulatory framework. Next, I want to talk about, and it's in general, I'm going to say that, you know, the regulatory framework, it's, you know, it is by definition, right? It is in the regulations, but I think kind of a flow chart infographic like this is a useful way to think about things. But I'm going to encourage everybody as they're implementing any of these projects to become familiar again with the regulations and probably your DDW district office. But before we go here, maybe I'll pause again to try to address questions or have some discussion around some of the things I said. Give a minute or two. Okay. Something in the chat. Sarah, is this document available online? No, it's not posted anywhere online. However, I will make it available to the folks who participated today. And then, okay, great, Sarah. And then Kira, yes, I can make, I think I have my contact info at the end. I can certainly make it available, but Kira and all, you know, the primary point of contact with DDW should be your local field office, should be the district engineer and or their staff, you know, in which they're the project that we're talking about, where it is geographically. Myself and my unit cover the whole state, and we're small, and so we also, you know, the regulatory aspects are covered by DDW district office, and so I'm trying not to step on any toes there. So I will provide my contact info, but primary contact info should be the DDW district office. Okay, I said too much about that. Oh, awesome. Link to the district office map in the chat here. So, all right, I'm going to carry on. Check here. Okay. I just stopped sharing. Okay. So let's talk about this infographic. It is not perfect. And I think one of the things that I think about when I think about the process for POU and POE, I think the initial engagement with the water system, with the school, with the with stakeholders, with the communities. If you read the regulation, you know, there's some requirements in there, but I don't know that it reads chronologically like I would think about it. Likewise, I'm not sure if this reads chronologically like how I've evolved to think about it. My punchline is that I think the early communication and early engagement for all involved, anyway, should just be early. should be upfront. I think that will set up the project for success and could identify some obstacles, right up front. So, this big, sorry. So in this top row is, is some of the big items that are required in regulation. The public education and public hearing, right? Like this is the regulations require involvement of those who will be served by the point of use or point of entry device. Like it's pretty integral there in the reg. And certainly makes sense, right? Like there is an increased really requirement for knowledge on that end user, right? Like this filling station, not that drinking fountain, or something like that in our school paradigm. Or hey, only the water from the spigot next to the kitchen sink is treated. Kitchen sink not treated, right? I think those things are important, and I think probably most of the people on this call, myself included, like maybe take that a little bit for granted. But as all of us have been out in communities, I think at least it's me right in the face, like, hey, like we need to, really support people in the fundamental understanding of kind of what's being proposed and how it would address a contamination issue. There's documents. I think of them as 3 documents, as kind of a monitoring plan. Well, actually, I don't know, maybe I don't think of them as 3. I think about a monitoring plan and operations and maintenance plan. And then there is this treatment strategy. That's why I say 3. And I think the treatment strategy is kind of upfront. And that for me, I think about what devices will be deployed, what devices will be deployed, where they will be deployed, kind of what makes sense for the particular application. I realize I'm kind of moving right to left here, but okay. Pilot testing, right? There's you want to choose a certified device that is certified for performance around the contaminant that you're talking about. And then do a pilot test because all waters are unique. And that is a best practice. This is usually going to last maybe 2 months. It could last longer. I think, again, working with the DDW district office to see what makes sense is the right step. I do want to camp out here a little bit and say, like, the pilot test, still for devices that have a performance certification. If there's a device that doesn't have a performance certification, or you're thinking about thinking about a contaminant that may not have a performance certification, the best practice, let's think about uranium. There aren't devices out there that are certified for performance, right, for removal. I think the best practice is to then identify a device that the technology, should work for that removal, and that device might be certified to remove a different contaminant. And it's certainly certified for safety, right? Essentially against like not leaching, right? It's not going to make the water quality worse. You do the pilot testing and then prove out that it actually does work for that particular background water quality. Then I think we're at the point where, you can install the devices, and then there needs to be continued public education, and then the ongoing monitoring maintenance that are outlined in some of the documents that need to be submitted as a part of the permit package, right? And then the permit or permit amendment, right? It's good for 3 years and requires revisiting every 3 years, and that is, the intent of the regulation there, right? It's that point of use and point of entry are meant to be an interim solution, and by requiring revisiting every 3 years, it allows for maybe technology has gotten better, maybe Maybe centralized treatment is now, maybe a situation on the ground has changed. Maybe centralized treatment has come a long way and is now affordable where it once wasn't. Maybe there's a potential for consolidation or some of those more robust drinking water solutions, like I kind of outlined in the second or third slide. Okay. Let's pause here. Wow, I've been talking a while. Let's pause here for any questions. All right, I'm a little alarmed by the lack of questions, but I'll carry on here. This is kind of the last part of the presentation, but it's really text heavy. So that is a warning. Okay, so I'll show you what the next slides are. Some feasibility considerations, right? And some more feasibility considerations, a few specifics about pilot studies, and then quite a bit on community acceptance. Again, some best practices, and then we're done. These certainly aren't everything, but as I combed through and actually had help combing through some information, this is some of the issues that rose to the top. So I don't want to give an idea that this is a comprehensive list. And actually some of the things that we talk about in here actually might be nice to haves, but probably all certainly best practices and mostly requirements depending on what paradigm we're thinking of. So I'm not going to read through all this, but I will kind of read through the questions about, so some things to think about is that demonstrating that centralized treatment is not economically feasible. If you look in the regulations, and again, here's the paradigm that we're thinking about here is a public water system, right? One of the requirements in the regulation is essentially saying, well, why can't you do centralized treatment, right? And it's usually economics, right? And so here's some of the bullets here are some of the best practices on trying to kind of answer or address that solution. There aren't any hard metrics around this. And so I think that, when I say hard metrics, what I mean is that like above X dollars is a thumbs up for, point of use, point of entry, and above, this or below this other threshold, right? Like it means you have to go down the centralized treatment route. That doesn't exist. And so it's a conversation with the permitting agency, which is the DDW district office, and about, what is actually economically feasible. I think, economies of scale, right? Like when we're talking about a very small system and, the numbers just don't really work out. They're eye-watering, right? And so let me also say, and I'm surprised I haven't said it before, it's just that, again, in framing, if we're talking about point of use in a public water system, regulations say 200 service connections or less. I think 200 service connections is high for a point of use, point of entry solution, just from a kind of a manageability standpoint. That's a lot of devices, and it's a lot of sampling, and it's a lot of, individuals to interact with. And so anyway, regulation says 200, close to 200 is ambitious. There are a few systems out there above 150 that are doing it or have done it, but it's challenging at any level, and I think it just gets harder with more. We talked about this, about point of use, point of entry devices, that we need to choose certified devices, need to have alarms, performance indicators, right? And then they need to be piloted. And then a public outreach plan, right? I think we talked about this quite a bit, is that just that engaging all stakeholders early is the best practice. And then thinking about how that dialogue, how that conversation continues after devices are installed. We talked about submitting a package to DDW, right? You know, and this is really about like following the permitting process. I know I sound like a broken record, but engaging your DDW district office that will be the permitting agency, like, is integral. I won't read this all to you. So maybe that last purple, the regulation talks about, you know, you need to submit for funding for a long-term solution, right? This is all predicated under the point of use and point of entry is an interim solution, right? And thus the 3-year permit renewal, but then also, you know, hopefully, and in most cases, right, the water system, the community is trying to implement a long-term, sustainable, robust solution. So maybe a new source, maybe a consolidation, maybe a centralized treatment, right? Pilot study, you know, there is a draft kind of protocol out there. You can get it from your DDW district office, see what to communicate what the pilot study will look like. And then, you know, pilot study, we, you know, install, you'll set up what, you'll agree to what sampling frequencies to do during the pilot studies. And then it's also a chance to test the safety devices, right? The performance indicators, really. Record data, and really, maybe this is what it's all about, right? Like, you're trying to determine that, one, the devices work, and then in some cases, like how long they can work for, right? Is maintenance needed at some frequency? You know, we want to try to anticipate that. I'm going to pause here because something came into the chat. I'm assuming it may be a question. Daisy, thank you for the question. What happens if the school or community is an LPA regulated? That's awesome. Thank you, Daisy. Yeah, so in the case that it is an LPA county, that the county has has primacy over small water systems, then yes, Daisy, you're correct. You'd be engaging with the county staff for all of the permitting processes. So as I've been saying, interface with your DDW district office. I guess what I should have been saying is that for non-LPA counties, DDW district office, and then for LPA counties, interfacing with the LPA. And the LPA may bring in DDW folks or may not. Thanks for the question and the opportunity to clarify, Daisy. Okay, I think I just have one more slide. You know, I've been working on point of use and point of entry pretty well. Anyway, I've been working on it in my years as a district engineer and whatnot, but certainly having a heavy focus on point of use and point of entry over the last year or so, and engaging with stakeholders and many of you here on this meeting. I guess I can't emphasize enough that community acceptance, community outreach, and engagement are critical to the success. Kind of without that, you know, what I've experienced and what I've heard from others' experiences, you know, without that, it's never going to work, right? You need active participation from folks, and the way you get that going is with outreach and engagement. I will not read through this, but I'll just leave it at, well, one is that I'll make the slides available, both the slides and then also that PDF that I was working through, make that available to everyone. And then I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, if maybe this is the other thing, that if you don't take anything else away, is just that community engagement and outreach and their acceptance and trust, right? Like, it's never going to work without that. You know, you can have the best device ever, you can have the best operators, the best superintendent of the school, et cetera, but if the community is not into it, like, it's not going to work. So if they're not into it, then, you know, re-engage and make sure the communication is good, and you know, and just take that input and see if there is an option that can work. So I'll stop there. Stop sharing. We certainly have time for some questions. I certainly have time for some questions. I don't see any that are coming through, but I will. I'll just pause here awkwardly. Okay, well, I guess another chance, if folks wanted to raise their hand, just take themselves off mute or put something in the chat. Daisy, thank you. Daisy asks about working with the Office of Public Participation on community engagement. Yes. Office of Public Participation, you know, it's a pretty small shop and they're tasked with doing a lot of things. And so there's been a few occasions, at least for me, where Office of Public Participation has been a partner in outreach into the community. That's, you know, they certainly have like an overwhelming strength there in their ability to engage community, engage, you know, engage people, right? Engage communities, engage the people in those communities. So I'm thinking about maybe 2 or so specific cases, kind of as a part of a you know, the point of use, point of entry might have been a piece to an overall picture that maybe ends up with a more robust solution. Thanks, Daisy. Yeah. All right. You're welcome, Daisy. Thanks for the question. All right, I'm going to throw it back to Michaela, and I guess thank everybody for your time and your attention.
Yes, thank you, Chad, for a wonderful, informative presentation. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to present on POUs. And yes, as it'll be put in the chat, there will be slides and PDF document and evaluation form sent out by the end of this week. But yeah, other than that, that concludes the TA training for today. I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Great job, Chad. Great job, everyone.
Thank you, Dad. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.